He hadn't been back in years, not since he had left that small town as a young man with nothing but dreams in his pocket. Now, standing at the edge of the long, dusty road that led to his old house, he felt a strange mix of excitement and unease. The trees that lined the path had grown taller, their branches swaying gently in the wind, as if whispering memories of a time long gone. The air smelled different too, a mix of earth, old wood, and something faintly sweet from the wildflowers that grew along the edges. He took a deep breath, trying to steady the rush of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. As a child, this house had been his entire world: the creaking wooden floors, the small garden out front, the narrow hallway that led to the rooms upstairs. All of it had shaped his earliest memories. He remembered running through the corridors with his siblings, laughter echoing off the walls, and he remembered the quiet evenings, sitting by the fireplace with his parents, listening to stories about life, love, and dreams. Those memories felt distant now, almost like someone else's life, yet standing here, he could almost hear the echoes, almost see the shadows of his younger self. The house, however, looked nothing like the one in his memories. Its walls were cracked and weathered, the paint peeling in long strips, the front gate hung crooked on rusty hinges, squeaking softly as the wind pushed it back and forth. Windows were broken, some with jagged glass still clinging to the frames, and others boarded up with old, splintered wood. Nature had slowly taken over, vines crawling up the walls, grass growing thick in the yard, giving the place a wild, almost forgotten look. Yet, despite all the decay, he felt a strange warmth, as if the house itself recognized him, welcoming him back after all these years. He remembered why he had come, the plan that had brought him here. After years of building his empire, after making millions and living in luxury, he had decided it was time to clear the land, to demolish the old house and make way for something new, something bigger, something grander, something worthy of the life he had built. But now, standing there, with the wind tugging at his coat and the sun casting long shadows across the broken steps, he hesitated. The house seemed to hold more than just memories. It seemed to hold a story, his story, and maybe even a part of him that he had left behind. He walked slowly toward the front door, his footsteps crunching on the gravel path. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the years and by the weight of anticipation. He reached out to touch the old wooden door, fingers brushing over its rough surface, worn smooth in places by countless hands over the decades. The door was locked, but that didn't matter. He had keys somewhere. But for the moment, he simply stood there, taking in the sight of the house, the garden, the yard. Everything that had been a part of him and his family. Memories came unbidden, uninvited, yet welcomed. He thought of his parents, who had worked tirelessly to give him and his siblings a life better than the one they had. He remembered his father's gentle but firm hands guiding him through small lessons about honesty and courage, and his mother's laughter, light and musical, filling the rooms with warmth. He thought of the small joys of childhood, the games, the scraped knees, the first time he had ridden a bicycle across the yard, and the evenings when the family would sit together and dream about the future. All of it felt alive again, even in the shadow of decay. As he circled the house, looking at the walls and the garden, he felt a strange sense of connection, almost as if the house itself was speaking to him, whispering that it had waited patiently for his return, that maybe it had something to show him before it was gone forever. He paused at the edge of the porch, looking out at the yard where he had played so many games as a child. He could almost see the laughter, hear the voices, feel the sunlight on his face, and for the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. He knew that this visit would be more than just a check before demolition. He knew that whatever he found inside those walls, whatever memories or secrets lingered in the dusty corners, would change something within him, something deep, something he hadn't realized he had been missing all these years. With a final glance at the overgrown garden and the sagging roof, he straightened his shoulders and made a decision. He would go inside, explore every corner, and face whatever the house had kept hidden, for him, for his family, for the boy he once was. The journey back to his roots had begun, and he had no idea how much it would change him. As he stepped closer to the house, he realized that it looked even smaller than he remembered, though somehow heavier, as if the years had pressed down on it like a slow, invisible hand. The walls, once bright with the warmth of his childhood memories, were now faded, streaked with dirt and watermarks. The roof sagged slightly in the middle, and a few tiles had fallen off, lying broken on the ground, waiting for someone to notice them. He paused for a moment, taking in the sight, the house. Looking almost like an old friend he hadn't recognized at first, yet, there was something about it that still felt familiar, something that tugged at his heart, and he couldn't turn away. The yard had changed too. Wild grass had grown tall and thick, almost hiding the path that had once led straight from the gate to the front door. Weeds pushed up between the cracks in the stone walkway, and the flowers his mother had planted were now only faint traces of color. Some had grown wild, twisting in ways that made them look both beautiful and strange. A broken swing hung crookedly from a tree in the corner, swaying gently in the breeze, creaking softly, as if it remembered the laughter of children who had long since grown up. He took a step onto the porch, and the wooden boards groaned under his weight, reminding him that nothing here had been cared for in years. The smell of old wood, damp earth, and a hint of something musty filled his nose, and he realized that the house was alive in its own quiet way, holding on to every memory, every sound, every touch that had happened within it. He could almost hear the echoes of voices, his parents, his siblings, himself, replaying faintly, like a forgotten song, just out of reach. As he walked slowly around the house, he noticed details that he had forgotten, or perhaps had never noticed as a child: the chipped paint on the window frames, the tiny scratches on the door from years of opening and closing, the small rusted latch on the gate that used to squeak every time he swung it open. Each detail reminded him of a moment, a memory tucked away in the corners of his mind. Memories that he hadn't thought about in decades suddenly rushed back with surprising clarity. He stopped at the side of the house where the garden had once been carefully tended, a place where his mother spent hours planting flowers and vegetables. Now, it was overgrown, wild, and free, yet still beautiful in a different way. Nature had reclaimed it, bending it to her will, and in that moment, he felt a strange mix of sadness and admiration. The garden had survived without anyone's help, just like the house itself, standing quietly through years of neglect, waiting for someone to notice, to remember, to care. Looking up at the windows, he saw reflections of the past in the broken glass, shadows of his younger self running along the walls, playing, laughing, dreaming. He realized that the house wasn't just a building made of bricks and wood, it was a living scrapbook of his life, containing moments he had long buried, memories he had never wanted to forget, but somehow had allowed to slip away in the rush of adulthood. He felt a strange pull toward the front door, as if the house was calling him in, inviting him to step inside and reconnect with the boy he had once been. For the first time since he had arrived, he felt anticipation mixed with a little fear. What would he find? What memories would awaken? Would he regret the years he had spent away? Yet, the questions didn't frighten him, they intrigued him, making every step closer feel more important, more meaningful. He finally reached out and touched the doorknob, his fingers brushing against the cold, rusty metal, and felt a shiver run down his spine. It wasn't just the chill of the metal, but a sense of history, a feeling that this door had held countless secrets, countless stories, all waiting for him to notice. He turned the knob slowly, the door groaning as it opened, and for a moment, he hesitated, breathing in the silence, listening to the faint creaks of the old house. Then, taking a deep breath, he stepped inside, ready to see what had remained hidden all these years, ready to confront the echoes of the past. As he stepped into the house, the air felt heavier, filled with dust and the faint scent of aged wood. The sunlight filtered through the broken windows, casting long, thin beams that danced across the floor, highlighting the cracks, the peeling wallpaper, and the forgotten objects scattered around. Every step he took made the floorboards groan, and he couldn't help but feel that the house was alive in some strange way, watching him, waiting for him to uncover what had been hidden all these years. He wandered slowly through the main hallway, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light. The walls were lined with old photographs, many faded beyond recognition. Their frames hung crookedly, some resting on the floor as if they had been pushed aside by time itself. He paused in front of one photograph, the faces almost familiar yet distant. The laughter of those moments seemed trapped behind the glass, waiting for him to remember. As he moved deeper into the house, he noticed something unusual about one of the walls. Near the staircase that led to the upstairs rooms, there was a faint outline, barely visible, like a rectangle carved into the plaster. He crouched down to examine it, brushing his fingers along the edges, and realized that it was not just a mark, it was a hidden panel, a part of the wall that had been cleverly concealed. His heart raced with curiosity. What could be behind it? He had always assumed he knew every corner of this house, every crevice, yet here was something completely unknown, waiting for him. He pushed gently against the panel, and to his surprise, it swung open with a quiet creak, revealing a small, narrow room tucked away from sight, almost like the house itself had been keeping a secret for him alone. The room was filled with dust and shadows, but as his eyes adjusted, he saw the shapes of old boxes, furniture covered in yellowed sheets, and a faint glow reflecting off something metallic in the corner. The air smelled of old paper, wood, and something faintly sweet, like the scent of memories themselves. Stepping inside carefully, he ran his hands over the objects, brushing away years of dust. He found a small wooden chest, worn from time, and lifted the lid, revealing stacks of old letters, photographs, and notebooks. Each piece seemed to tell a story, fragments of lives that had been lived in this very house, memories that had been hidden away, perhaps forgotten by everyone else but preserved here, waiting for him to find them. He opened a notebook and began to read, and with each line, the past came alive. He read about childhood dreams, hopes, and fears, written in careful, familiar handwriting. Some letters were from his parents, filled with advice, encouragement, and stories about their own lives. The emotions in the room were tangible, as if the walls themselves remembered every word, every tear, every laugh that had ever been spoken there. He felt a lump rise in his throat, a mixture of nostalgia, sadness, and awe, realizing that he had stumbled upon a treasure far more valuable than anything money could buy. In the corner of the room, he noticed a small stack of photographs tied together with a faded ribbon. He picked them up and let the images tell their story. Him as a child playing in the garden, his parents smiling proudly, moments he had long forgotten but now felt so vivid. It was as if time had folded in on itself, allowing him to step back into a life he had left behind, yet one that had never truly left him. For the first time since he had arrived, he understood that this visit would not be about demolition, about tearing the house down or building something new. It was about discovery, about reconnecting with a past that had shaped him, about uncovering the hidden layers of life that had been quietly waiting for him to notice. He realized that the house had more to show him, more secrets to reveal, and that this small hidden room was just the beginning, a doorway into memories, lessons, and truths he hadn't faced in decades. He lingered in the room for a long while, touching the papers, turning the photographs, and reading the letters, letting the emotions wash over him. He felt closer to his parents, to the boy he once was, to the life that had made him who he had become, and as he finally closed the notebook and looked around the hidden room one last time, he knew that his journey had only just begun, that the house had more stories to tell, and he was ready to listen, to learn, and to change. The hidden room had opened a door to memories he hadn't thought about in years, and now, as he carried the old notebooks and photographs through the house, he felt as if the walls themselves were whispering stories to him. Each step he took seemed to echo with laughter, arguments, and quiet moments of reflection from decades ago. He moved slowly, almost reverently, as if he were walking through a museum of his own life. He paused in what had once been the living room, the place where his family had gathered every evening. The furniture had long since been removed, leaving the bare wooden floors exposed, and the fireplace stood cold and empty, yet he could still see the room as it had been, the sofa where his mother had sat, reading aloud from a book, his father pacing while talking softly about work or plans, his siblings chasing one another with unrestrained energy, their voices, their laughter, their small fights over toys or attention, seemed to linger in the air, faint but unmistakable. Opening one of the old journals, he began reading the words penned by his father decades ago. Lines about hard work, resilience, and the dreams he held for his children made his chest tighten. He remembered the evenings he had spent at this very spot, listening to his father's calm, guiding voice, never realizing at the time how important these lessons would become. The house, in that moment, was no longer just a structure. It was a living archive of love, struggle, and hope, preserving every detail of their family life. He wandered toward the staircase leading upstairs, each creak of the steps bringing back memories of late-night games, whispered conversations, and the occasional scolding that now seemed gentle in retrospect. In one of the rooms, he found his old desk still tucked in the corner, covered in dust, but he could picture it exactly as it had been, papers scattered, crayons and pens strewn about, the beginnings of school projects and doodles that only a child could make. the desk was more than furniture. It was a symbol of curiosity, growth, and the small beginnings that had led him to where he was now. In another room, he discovered a pile of old toys, faded and worn. Some of them had belonged to his siblings, some were his own, and yet each one told a story. Each toy was a memory, a fragment of time, reminding him of laughter, imagination, and the carefree days of childhood. Holding a small wooden car in his hand, he remembered the afternoons he had spent racing it across the floor, pretending it was a real vehicle, dreaming of adventures far beyond the town. Now, decades later, he could see how those dreams had shaped his ambition, his drive, and his relentless pursuit of success. He opened another box and found letters from his mother, filled with advice, encouragement, and stories about her own childhood. The words were simple, yet profound, reminding him of the values she had instilled: kindness, honesty, and perseverance. As he read, he felt tears welling in his eyes, a mixture of nostalgia and gratitude, realizing how much he had taken for granted in the rush of building a career, building wealth, building a life far away from this house. Sitting on the edge of his old bed, he traced the patterns on the worn quilt, the very one his mother had sewn with care. Each stitch seemed to hold a memory, each thread connected him to the people he loved, the moments he cherished, and the lessons he had learned. He understood something then that he hadn't before. The house, the memories, the objects, they were not just remnants of the past, they were part of him, inseparable from who he had become. Hours passed unnoticed as he moved from room to room, reading, touching, remembering, and sometimes just sitting quietly, absorbing the weight of the past. By the time he returned to the living room, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the floor, yet he felt lighter, more grounded, more connected. The house had reminded him of his roots, of the love, struggles, and dreams that had formed the foundation of his life. For the first time in many years, he didn't feel the need to rush, to plan, to control. He realized that reliving the past was not about dwelling, it was about understanding, appreciating, and learning. He had rediscovered a part of himself he had forgotten, and it was a feeling far richer than any success or wealth could ever provide. He had been wandering through the house for hours, moving from room to room, reliving memories, and reconnecting with a past he thought he had left behind. The sunlight outside had begun to fade, filtering through the broken windows in soft, golden streams that seemed to highlight every corner of the dusty rooms. Yet, despite the nostalgia and the emotions that filled him, he felt that there was still something hidden, something the house hadn't shown him yet. As he stepped into the attic, he noticed a faint glow coming from beneath a pile of old furniture. The room smelled of old wood, dust, and a faint trace of something sweet, almost like the scent of forgotten letters. He carefully moved aside the stacked chairs and boxes, and his eyes fell on a small, locked chest tucked in the corner. Its metal hinges were rusted, and the wood was worn, but it seemed untouched by time, waiting quietly for him. His heart raced as he knelt beside the chest, brushing away layers of dust. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to lift the heavy lid, only to find it locked. He looked around for a key, and after a few moments, noticed a tiny, folded note pinned beneath a loose floorboard. Unfolding it, he found his mother's handwriting, delicate yet firm, with a few words that made his breath catch: "For when you are ready to see the truth." With hands slightly shaking, he fitted the small key into the lock. Turning it slowly, the lid creaked open to reveal a collection of letters, journals, and photographs, carefully preserved. Each item seemed to radiate importance, as if the house itself was telling him, "These are your treasures, the memories you need to find." He picked up the first letter and read the familiar handwriting, words filled with love, advice, and encouragement from his parents, words he hadn't seen since he was a child. Then he noticed something even more astonishing: a stack of old journals, each one meticulously kept by his father, detailing not only his daily life but also his hopes and dreams for the family, his struggles and sacrifices, and the lessons he wanted his children to carry forward. Reading the pages, he felt a lump rise in his throat, the weight of emotion almost too heavy to bear. Each word seemed to breathe life into memories he had long forgotten, giving him a connection to his parents he hadn't felt in decades. Among the journals, he discovered something unexpected: a small envelope addressed to him, in his mother's handwriting, sealed carefully, as if it had been waiting all these years. He hesitated for a moment before opening it, unsure if he was ready for what it might contain, but curiosity and a deep, unexplainable pull compelled him to tear the seal, revealing a collection of letters, photographs, and notes, each telling stories about him as a child, his achievements, his fears, and even the small moments of mischief and joy. One letter, in particular, caught his attention. A long note from his father described not only the family's sacrifices but also his deepest wishes for him, urging him to always remember where he came from, to value relationships over wealth, and to find happiness in simple things. The emotions poured over him like a wave, and he realized that this was more than a discovery. It was a gift, a chance to see his parents' love and guidance in a way he had never fully appreciated. Sitting there in the attic, surrounded by decades of preserved memories, he understood something profound. The house had hidden these treasures not to be lost forever, but to teach him, to reconnect him with the past, to remind him of the family and values that had shaped him. It wasn't just about nostalgia. It was about clarity, about understanding the person he had become and the person he was meant to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the attic windows, he realized that his journey of rediscovery had only just begun. The chest, the letters, the journals, they were not merely objects, but keys to understanding life, love, and the meaning of home, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace, a feeling that the house, in all its dust, decay, and forgotten corners, had given him the greatest gift of all, a connection to his past that would change the way he lived from now on. He had been wandering through the house for hours, moving from room to room, reliving memories, and reconnecting with a past he thought he had left behind. The sunlight outside had begun to fade, filtering through the broken windows in soft, golden streams that seemed to highlight every corner of the dusty rooms. Yet, despite the nostalgia and the emotions that filled him, he felt that there was still something hidden, something the house hadn't shown him yet. As he stepped into the attic, he noticed a faint glow coming from beneath a pile of old furniture. The room smelled of old wood, dust, and a faint trace of something sweet, almost like the scent of forgotten letters. He carefully moved aside the stacked chairs and boxes, and his eyes fell on a small, locked chest tucked in the corner. Its metal hinges were rusted, and the wood was worn, but it seemed untouched by time, waiting quietly for him. His heart raced as he knelt beside the chest, brushing away layers of dust. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to lift the heavy lid, only to find it locked. He looked around for a key, and after a few moments, noticed a tiny, folded note pinned beneath a loose floorboard. Unfolding it, he found his mother's handwriting, delicate yet firm, with a few words that made his breath catch. For when you are ready to see the truth. With hands slightly shaking, he fitted the small key into the lock, turning it slowly. The lid creaked open to reveal a collection of letters, journals, and photographs, carefully preserved. Each item seemed to radiate importance, as if the house itself was telling him, "These are your treasures, the memories you need to find." He picked up the first letter and read the familiar handwriting, words filled with love, advice, and encouragement from his parents, words he hadn't seen since he was a child. Then he noticed something even more astonishing, a stack of old journals, each one meticulously kept by his father, detailing not only his daily life but also his hopes and dreams for the family, his struggles and sacrifices, and the lessons he wanted his children to carry forward. Reading the pages, he felt a lump rise in his throat, the weight of emotion almost too heavy to bear. Each word seemed to breathe life into memories he had long forgotten, giving him a connection to his parents he hadn't felt in decades. Among the journals, he discovered something unexpected, a small envelope addressed to him, in his mother's handwriting, sealed carefully, as if it had been waiting all these years. He hesitated for a moment before opening it, unsure if he was ready for what it might contain, but curiosity and a deep, unexplainable pull compelled him to tear the seal, revealing a collection of letters, photographs, and notes, each telling stories about him as a child, his achievements, his fears, and even the small moments of mischief and joy. One letter, in particular, caught his attention. A long note from his father described not only the family's sacrifices but also his deepest wishes for him, urging him to always remember where he came from, to value relationships over wealth, and to find happiness in simple things. The emotions poured over him like a wave, and he realized that this was more than a discovery. It was a gift, a chance to see his parents' love and guidance in a way he had never fully appreciated. Sitting there in the attic, surrounded by decades of preserved memories, he understood something profound. The house had hidden these treasures not to be lost forever, but to teach him, to reconnect him with the past, to remind him of the family and values that had shaped him. It wasn't just about nostalgia. It was about clarity, about understanding the person he had become and the person he was meant to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the attic windows, he realized that his journey of rediscovery had only just begun. The chest, the letters, the journals, they were not merely objects, but keys to understanding life, love, and the meaning of home, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace, a feeling that the house, in all its dust, decay, and forgotten corners, had given him the greatest gift of all, a connection to his past that would change the way he lived from now on. The next morning, he returned to the house with a new sense of purpose. The decision to demolish had vanished, replaced by a quiet determination to bring life back to the place that had shaped him. He walked through the front gate, now creaking less ominously than before, and breathed in the scent of overgrown grass and wildflowers, noticing for the first time how even in neglect, the house and garden had a strange beauty, resilient and enduring. He had hired a team of local craftsmen, skilled in restoration, but before any work could begin, he took one last slow walk through every room, cataloging the damage, the wear, and the hidden treasures that needed protection. The walls with peeling paint, the broken windows, the warped floorboards, they were not obstacles, but reminders of time, of memory, of life lived within these walls. Each flaw carried a story, and he resolved to honor them while giving the house a chance to shine once more. The garden became his first priority. He spent hours with the workers clearing weeds, trimming wild vines, and rediscovering the flowers his mother had once planted. There were roses, though the stems were brittle, and patches of lavender, resilient as ever. He gently pruned, nurtured, and watered, as if by tending to the garden, he could also nurture the memories, coaxing the past back to life while preparing for a vibrant future. Inside, the restoration began room by room. Each cracked wall was carefully repaired, preserving the original texture where possible. Each window was replaced with new glass, but the frames retained the charm of their weathered history. He watched as the craftsmen worked with care, learning the old techniques, restoring details he hadn't realized he had missed. Like the intricate carvings on the door frames and the delicate patterns in the staircase banister, every detail brought a sense of pride, as though the house itself was smiling at his decision, welcoming him home. He spent hours in his old bedroom, restoring it to match his childhood memories, yet adding touches of comfort and warmth for the future. He replaced the old quilt with a carefully preserved version of the one his mother had sewn, the patterns vibrant and familiar. He hung photographs along the walls, keeping the memories alive while letting the sunlight dance across them. He even found a corner to display the journals and letters from the attic, a permanent reminder of the family's love and guidance. As days turned into weeks, the transformation was breathtaking. The house no longer looked deserted or abandoned. It seemed to pulse with life once again. Each repaired wall, each polished floorboard, each flower in the garden whispered of renewal, of love, and of history preserved. He invited neighbors, friends, and even distant relatives to see the restoration, and every visitor remarked on the care, devotion, and heart that had gone into every corner. The house was no longer a memory frozen in time. It was a living, breathing testament to family, resilience, and legacy. Throughout the process, he found himself changing as well. The work, the patience, and the attention to detail reminded him of his parents' lessons, of the importance of nurturing, caring, and valuing what cannot be replaced. He realized that restoring the house was also restoring himself, reconnecting with a past that had shaped him, and finding a grounding he hadn't felt in years. By the time the final touches were completed, the house was ready to welcome life once again. It gleamed with warmth and history, with every corner telling a story. Every room held memories, preserved yet renewed, a bridge between the past and the present. He stood at the entrance, looking at what had been restored, and felt a deep, unshakable peace. The house had survived, just as he had, and together they would move forward, honoring the past while embracing the future. And in that moment, he understood fully that home is not just a place, but a collection of memories, love, and history, a place where the past and present coexist, guiding, teaching, and inspiring. He had set out to destroy, but instead, he had rebuilt, not just a house, but a connection, a legacy, a story that would endure for generations. The house, once silent and forgotten, now hummed with life and memory. Its walls glowed warmly in the afternoon sun, polished floors reflecting the light as if the past itself were smiling. Standing at the entrance, the billionaire felt a profound calm settle over him, a feeling he hadn't realized he had been searching for all these years. It wasn't just pride in the restoration, it was something deeper, a connection, a sense of belonging, a reconciliation with the life he had left behind. As he walked through each room, he noticed how the house had changed him, how it had reminded him of the importance of family, of love, and of memories that cannot be replaced. The photographs on the walls no longer seemed like distant reminders, but like living companions, smiling at him, encouraging him to honor what had been, and to carry it forward. Every corner, every creak of the staircase, every glimmer of sunlight through the windows seemed to tell him that the journey had not only restored the house, it had restored him. He sat in the living room, holding the letters and journals he had discovered in the hidden attic, feeling the familiar paper in his hands. He realized how much wisdom and love had been preserved there, waiting for him to understand, waiting for him to see beyond the walls, beyond the property, to the life lessons and family bonds that mattered most. He smiled softly, thinking about his parents, their sacrifices, their hopes, and how, even now, decades later, they were guiding him. The garden, now vibrant and cared for, reminded him of patience and persistence, of the importance of nurturing what you value. Each flower, each blade of grass seemed to symbolize the resilience of life, the ability to grow even after years of neglect. He realized that just like the house, he too had been in need of restoration, that the busy, distant years of wealth and travel had caused him to lose touch with the core of who he was. But here, in this place, he had found himself again. Neighbors and friends often came to visit, marveling at the transformation, and each visit reminded him that the house was not just for him, but for everyone who had been part of its story. He invited his siblings to see the restored rooms, and together they laughed, reminisced, and even cried, reconnecting in ways that had been long overdue. The house had become a bridge between the past and the present, a living memory, a place where family could gather, heal, and celebrate life. He thought about the future, about the decisions he would make now, and realized that this experience had changed more than the house. It had changed him. It had taught him that success is hollow without connection, that wealth is empty without meaning, that life is richest when the past is honored and the lessons of love, patience, and family are never forgotten. He understood that true legacy is not measured in money, but in memories preserved, bonds strengthened, and stories shared. On the last evening before leaving, he walked slowly through the house one final time, touching the walls, looking at the photographs, and pausing at the garden. He felt gratitude for the house, for his parents, for the life lessons he had received, and for the chance to see the past clearly before moving forward. It was a feeling of completeness, a sense of having come home, not just to a building, but to himself. As he stepped outside and looked back at the house glowing in the golden sunset, he knew that the journey had given him something priceless. He hadn't just restored a house, he had restored a life, a connection, and a heart that had been scattered across distant places. The billionaire who had arrived with plans to demolish had left with something far greater, understanding, peace, and a renewed sense of purpose. He smiled quietly, knowing that this house, these memories, and this journey would stay with him forever, shaping the rest of his life in ways that no wealth could ever replicate. The house, standing proudly against the twilight sky, seemed to hum softly, as if acknowledging that the past, the present, and the future were finally in harmony. And in that quiet, golden moment, he realized that sometimes, the greatest discoveries are not about what we gain, but about what we remember, cherish, and carry forward.